Hello, everybody. It's Graham Cofe with My Music, bringing you music from all across the world. And today I'm going to be speaking to Andrew. Where are you coming from today?
Portland, Oregon, baby.
Oregon. See, that's definitely the other side of the world. First, before I speak to Andrew and Berkley, I'm going to play this little video from Analog Trash to enjoy, and we'll be right back after this. There you go. And suddenly the music fades and disappears. But you've surrounded, sir, by quite a lot of instruments that, of the likes that we saw in that video, are you not?
Yeah. I'm in my studio today.
And how long have you been collecting instruments?
I mean, I guess since I started playing, which was around like 12 or 13, but I got really serious about it in the last like 5 years when I started engineering and producing and mixing records. So before I was in Portland, I was living in North Texas, and I had a studio out there, and I have then we moved, and I have less space here, so I have a lot of stuff like just in storage, and this is the stuff that I would use, just for my own.
On a regular basis.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff like behind the camera too, but yeah, I'm at this like nexus where I need to figure out what am I going to do with all of like my drum kits and big
Okay.
speakers and stuff.
So look, you are someone that's a little bit of a geek when it comes to instruments then.
Yeah, just a bit. Yeah.
Just a bit, yeah. Did you see the recent documentary with Damon Albarn talking about
No.
his storage space for all of his instruments that he uses on the various Gorillaz albums, etc.? Did you see that at all?
No, but I might have seen a clip of it. I saw someone talking to him about an omnichord.
Oh, the Omnichord,
Yeah.
the Rock One preset.
Right. Yeah. That's so funny.
It is. It's brilliant, isn't it? It's like he presses it and then he goes, "Oh, but guess what?" And it's like, wait for it, the drum break, and it's
Yeah,
like,
there it
it's
is.
all there.
Yeah. Yeah, how simple. Yeah. You don't need to overthink things. I mean, I think you can get in that trap where you can think about, this needs to be so unique. But I mean, if it's kind of like a dusty sound that not a lot of people know about, yeah, you can get away with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess it kind of goes back to like hip hop stuff, thinking about like if the drum break is recognizable, there's some merit to that too. Like that's cool to know where that's coming from. Yeah.
But what I'm seeing in the background is quite organized.
This is a recent development.
Oh, right. Okay. Because, sometimes when I've interviewed people and they've got quite a lot of kit in the background, there's been kind of wires everywhere and bits of kit
Right.
everywhere. And you could probably, they tell me that they could probably put their hands on any particular piece of equipment really quickly, but I don't believe it. But that looks super organized.
Yeah. So recently, this was like just a few days ago, I patched in my synthesizers and my pedals and some of this like outboard stuff um into like its own patch bay. Like I have like a few patch bays for my studio stuff, like for my mixing things. But yeah, I wanted everything to be like accessible like at any moment. So now I can just like plug in and reconfigure orders of things like right on the fly. So I'm really stoked about that, but I haven't had a chance to really dig into it. Yeah, there's so much stuff, but I'm kind of trying to like limit myself now, thinking about all these choices that I've had. Like I don't want to feel like I need to use everything all the time. I kind of want to like develop like a palette and and just work with that and say, okay, I'm going to work with these three pieces and see what I can make with that.
Well, before we get into like where the sort of love for it all started, you know, are there things that you always tend to go back to? Are there pieces of kit or, you know, particular sounds or anything that you tend to sort of always gravitate back to, being that's kind of my sound that I
Yeah, like with I don't know if I'm producing, I have an easier time setting a palette for with artists, but for myself, like making this Berkeley stuff, um, I found like a lot of modulation, like a lot of real like wobbly chorus and like LFO kind of stuff that just is going to make things, warble. Um, yeah, chorus, analog delay is kind of the thing I'll put on anything. Like if I'm working on my own stuff or any other record, I'm really in love with that kind of stuff. I've fallen in love with like sequential circuits, synthesizers. This is a Prophet 6 behind me, and I've been like, oh, I should get a Prophet 5, but like I don't. I mean, a 6 is a lot of synthesizer in one thing, but those make this sound of sort of like Ryuichi Sakamoto sound that I love. It's just really like wow, like I love that kind of stuff. Um, Although I didn't have a ton of that on the Berkeley record, and I wish I did. There was a lot more Roland JX3P, which I kind of like approximated that sound as much as I could. But just like analog synthesizers and analog delays, I think that's my thing right now, and it has been for a while, so I think I'm going to stick with that. I just love hearing a sound returned to me a little bit messed up. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah, yeah.
into.
I know for a fact that the people at Analog Trash, when they see this interview back and they hear you talking like that, will absolutely gush over that. And I'm sure there's other people out there that are like, what on earth's he talking about? It sounds like a foreign language. Yeah, it is, unless you're into it, and then it's it all makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
Where did it start for you though, in terms of who got you infused about tech? Because not music per se, but
right.
tech based music. Yeah.
Uh, so when I was a kid, I was really like into radio. I just the idea of like that this thing was coming to me through the speakers, and I didn't really understand how it worked, but I was fascinated with hearing the pop music of the time. And at that time, it was like New Jack Swing, and like we're coming out of like late 80s, very early 90s. So there's a lot of like digital stuff happening. And I mean, I didn't have like the capacity or the vocabulary to talk about like how interesting that was to me, but I think that definitely had a huge impact hearing this big 80s drums with like gated reverb. Um,
Oh, it was
just
definitely, it was very, it was big.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and very hard. And like house music was really popular, which is like that's such an anomaly to think about how like that was so mainstream. But like the combination of those two things kind of got me interested in just like speakers and knobs and levers and stuff. So there's a track on the Berkeley record that's a lot of like old recordings of me as a kid doing like fake radio broadcasts. And as I was compiling that track, I found the moment that I actually like recorded something for the first time. It's my mom showing me how to use the record playback function on like a little boombox. And from that moment on, I just like started making all of these little like fake radio recordings where I would patch in and out from a live radio thing, and then I would act like it was my own show. So I would like listen to this like Tony track, and then drop in, and I would be the DJ, and I'd drop back out and listen to commercials or whatever from the radio. And that was totally where it started because I was just obsessed with like cassette tapes and being able to hear what I had done like a week ago and just that control over like kind of nothingness. There's this weird so like if you ever like run a studio or if you ever uh are an engineer and you're like running a session, you realize like how many problems you can encounter. And I think it's because like you're not really supposed to be doing what's happening. Like
Yeah.
we're like controlling electricity, we're harnessing it in a really strange way to be able to translate like sound into energy and back into sound again. So that still fascinates me, like the way the radio did, where it was like here's sound going over the air and then reaching you again. Um,
It's
yeah, I think that's
fascinating
where
you
it all
should say
started.
that. You're not the first artist that probably of your generation who also loves sort of like electronic production or whatever that has said to me it started by taping stuff off the radio and
Mm,
slicing it up and whatever. And I did it myself probably 10 years before you, but
yeah.
it was just it's an absolute fascinating. In fact, it led to me going into radio because
Oh, that's great.
you
Man, what a
know
good
I,
time. What kind of stuff were you playing like for the first time? Especially like where you're from. I mean, like so much good music at that time came from your part of the world.
I loved what was really interesting. I had quite a really interesting musical upbringing because my parents didn't really listen to music, so
Hmm.
so their palette was very limited. New Seekers, a little bit of the Carpenters. That we had a terrible album, which if someone can find it and send it to me one day, I'd love to just have a copy of it on vinyl, just because it is awful, and I will probably do something with it. I'll probably turn it into a remix album, but it was
Yeah.
called Bach, Beethoven, and the Beatles do Bossa Nova, and it was
Wow.
literally it was songs from Beethoven. It was pieces of music from Beethoven. It was the Beatles songs, but and it was all bossa nova. It was all on like a Bontempi organ. And the
Yeah, I bet
first,
the beats are insane.
yeah, and the first, in fact, the first keyboard we had in the house was a Bontempi organ with the fan. So you got that natural modulation from literally it was blowing air over the notes, so it was like
Uh-huh.
constant. Um, but yeah, I guess that the first. So I grew up actually spending a lot of time with people that were 10 years older than me, and therefore I was introduced to things like Yes and Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and a lot of progressive rock and stuff like that, which kind of opened my ears to musicality. And then alongside that, there was two kinds of music that was happening at the time that really kind of permeated as well. One was a little bit of pop, and it was interesting to find out later on how they'd been influenced by the other people I was listening, which were people like Howard Jones and Nick
Mm,
Kershaw, who actually were underestimated in terms of like some of the chord changes and the structure of those songs were actually really clever, right?
right. Yeah.
Compared with a lot of the pop that was around. You listen to like Nick Kershaw's chord sequences, he throws in interesting shapes in there. He's not, into his songs.
Right.
But the other side was things like Jean-Michel Jarre and
Oh,
Tomitar and, you know,
legends. Yeah, yeah. I love
yeah,
Tamina. Yeah. Yeah. I've developed this. I mean, I guess I always had it, and I just didn't know what I was listening to when I was younger. But like Moog synthesizers, like I mean, obviously that's a very well treaded, well known sound. But later in life, I found Mort Garson. Um, but I found him through his album Black Mass, where he was using the name Lucifer. And this was like before they've recently reissued a lot of those records on Sacred Bones Records, and I was introduced to Lucifer's Black Mass like 7 years I think before they reissued it. So I just had that one record that I listened to all the time, and that is full of like tape echo, which you can imitate really well with a nice analog delay. So I just got obsessed with this real like kind of fuzzy sound and all of the crazy sounds that he could get from. I mean, he had like a wall, like he had like the big modular system, but um, yeah, those older sounds that kind of predated the things that I got into when it was listening to things like Madonna or Janet Jackson, um, and how they used like real digital drum machines and digital synthesizers, like hearing what those old analog things
Well,
could
you see, I
do
was
was
on the
like,
cusp between the two. Yeah, because
Right,
at school, at one point at school, we had really cool kit. I mean, we used to have like old analog synthesizers with patch bays.
right.
Yeah, which was brilliant, and you could take them home. I'm
Yeah,
not sure
like
where, I'm not
I,
sure whether you were meant to take them home, but we did take them home.
yeah, I'm very envious of like that time when synthesis was so new that it was sort of like not in vogue, but it was like kind of niche. And there were those schools, like there were universities that had these giant units, and there were all these like AMS synthy kind of things. A lot of buchlas were at these universities, like things that are still really out of people's reach,
Yeah,
financially. Like that would be amazing to go make an album for free at your university with these incredibly like large high-end synthesizers.
but
Yeah.
the first keyboard uh, that I brought to actually start writing on was, and you may know this, was the Yamaha CX5M,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah.
Which for anyone who's geeky enough was actually a Mitsubishi MSX computer
Hmm.
with a uh, with a full size keyboard, and and the computer took carts, and it had a very kind of very basic, very early days sequencing software on it that you could write into. You could either type into it and put your notation in, literally,
Yeah.
yeah, or you could actually play it, and it would be delayed in putting it up on the stave, and then you could move it on the stave. But it was really basic. But it had some great sounds as well, because it was at that cusp. It was just before like the DX7
Hmm.
and the start of all of that. But it had it, so it kind of still sounded analog at times, but it was going into digital, and so it was an exciting time. I feel, you
Yeah,
know.
with that interface, like it makes you think of like something like the Fairlight, where it's like you have this like
Oh, the Fairlight,
computer
yeah,
where you can really like dig deeper into how you sculpt the sounds. But yeah, the Yamaha carts thing is really interesting. I didn't realize. I mean, I've played on DX7s through time at different places, but like it never registered with me that they also take carts. Like you can expand the patches with carts. I was watching a James Taylor video from the 80s where I mean he like that was his sound is like this really crisp sound. So of course his keyboardist was using a DX7 and he had this little like cartridge sitting out of it. I was like, that looks like an
what's that?
Atari. Like what? Yeah. And yeah, it turned out this entire time that they had been continuing that in their product line of, expanding their preset range with these little cartridges.
Yeah. But and the other thing is, and actually that came out in the Damon Albarn interview as well, which was that um, it was kind of at a time as well where we were just so needing to be experimental because the kit was kind of not developing quickly enough, and it was expensive. It was really expensive as well. Kit
Yeah.
was kit was very expensive to get into. I mean, Casio then came along and started producing a load of stuff that was at a more affordable level. But we were so desperate to try and experiment with sounds that you would use whatever you could get. So the amount of time, and you probably doing this as well, but the amount of times that we were like playing with guitar pedals because they were actually quite an affordable
Right.
thing. And it's like synth into guitar pedal. I'm going to use this to, you know, create reverb on this because it doesn't actually have that built in.
Right. Yeah, there's this sort of that makes me think of this. I was having this conversation with the guitarist in the band for the West Coast band here, and we're both like really into pedals right now. And it feels like you sort of like plateau at this point where like if you get into pedals, you're probably going to stay into pedals for the rest of your life. Probably because like the way that the technology is now. But we were talking about how like we're looking for things that actually mangle our sounds. Like the fidelity and like the sort of like analog digital conversion is so good now for pedals that I'm looking for things that actually like mess everything up.
Crunch it up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm getting like these like tape emulators that like aren't actually like giving you tape emulation, but more of like damaged tape kind of stuff. Loopers that modulate or like that will give you back what you've just played at a lower fidelity, which is kind of like that goes back to my interest in things like analog delay, but hearing the digital artifacts is something that I'm interested in now. Because I mean, back in the day, like those digital things, it was like this is a higher resolution. This is like maxing out because you're at CD resolution, like 16-bit maybe. But now you can have like 96K resolution come back through a guitar pedal, and it's like this sounds too good. Like I actually want something that sounds worse than what I'm putting into it to make it interesting, you know?
Do you think in a way that because we're spoilt these days with everything going straight to computer, and unless your hard drive gives out, and you've probably got a spare one of those anyway, or any of the your cloud backup or whatever goes away or whatever, ultimately you ain't going to lose anything, and you ain't going to lose any quality or whatever in the recording. But back in the day, we had in the early days of kind of recording anything that was coming out from an electronic sound, etc., and therefore it had that vibrancy. But then you were putting it to tape, and if you were trying to do stuff with it, you might actually loop it on tape.
Yeah,
or then later on, even when you had like early Tascams and stuff like that, where you had like you were using a cassette tape which doesn't have an awful lot of bandwidth in terms of actually keeping the quality there, and you were tracking from track to track and whatever, and you were losing quality. Effectively it was like there was a cut-off point. It was like, I have to do it now, because if I don't do it now, this has gone too far.
right. Yeah, yeah, you're always making a copy of a copy and it's getting worse every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean it's funny that like all these classic recordings and bands and songs that we name check so often, they all sound pretty bad by today's standards. Like if you listen to, those Beatles songs, like any Beatles songs that everyone's like, oh, this is the one, they're so distorted. And sometimes you can't really hear the kick on like Rolling Stones songs. Um, but it doesn't matter. Like there's this vibe to the recording, or we're just so used to it. Like maybe it's not like
Oh, I
this
mean, one
universal
of the
thing, but
first ones of these that I did was with Steve Hackett from Genesis, and
uh-huh.
he talks about those early recordings with Genesis, and he says it's just dire because you can hear. He says you can go back and you hear it, and you can hear the guitar going out of tune as I'm playing it.
Yeah,
But we it's not like you could stop and go back and do it again. It was like
right.
that was it. We were running out of we were running out of track time on
Yeah.
this, and it was just that was it. That whatever was there that had to stay there. But I love that. I think
Yeah,
it's great.
I mean, like now there's this kind of approach to thinking about recording, like you're trying to make something the best that it can be, but with reasonable amount of limitation, you are actually recording like an individual or a group in a moment in time. And there's going to be some overdubbing and stuff, but it's still like a very human performance, even if they're playing something electronic and you're doing, some wild like MIDI to tape machine syncing, type of stuff. It's still a human performance, and you can hear the challenges that they're facing. Like, okay, the guitar is going out of tune for whatever reason, right? Like things are heating up in the studio and everything is like, you know, I mean, like things are literally changing because of the air in the room. That's cool to me. Like I love hearing stuff like that. I'm like the more music that I listen to or that I am around, for work reasons or whatever, I find myself being more into like incidental things, like field recordings, not even, experimental stuff, but just like moments in time that were captured because that's kind of what you're doing anyway. You're just recording music
Mm.
versus like going out and sticking a mic out of a window and capturing like a city sound or something like that. The only difference is like the source to me now. Um, it's like I'm still just really fascinated with the act of like getting it on some kind of media, you know?
I was going to say, do you feel that there's actually a really important need to do that as well? Because for me, the transition from everything being stored physically, and I don't necessarily mean music, but everything that we have in life being stored physically on a disk or a hard disk or in a book or whatever, to cloud base, where we don't have control over it, means that we are now a generation where our memories, our photos, our life, whatever, it's all there, but it could go like that tomorrow. It could be gone,
Right.
right? Because there's, you know, and so do you feel in a way that actually trying to trying to create pieces of art and whatever, where actually some of that gets captured and is in another tangible form, is quite important.
Yeah. So I have a friend who's a filmmaker who complains often about like streaming. And I mean, I have plenty of gripes about streaming too, but he made the point of like you just never own the thing. And you know, if you're really into this movie that's streaming, and they just pull it, then it's gone. And you know, you're kind of forced to go out and like buy the thing. But they're making the thing like less and less now. Like that's becoming more scarce because it's like, oh well, it'll just be streaming. So then like no one ever makes like I mean like the writer's strike here. They're saying like you can't get the shows that they're pulling on disc because they just thought that it was going to be streaming forever, and now people aren't getting the residuals because the show just doesn't exist anymore. Like there's that case to be made about things that like artists make, just you know, like demos or whatever it is that they're making. Um, you have to have some way of referencing that, and even if it's on like hard drives can over time fail, even if they're not ever plugged in. Like they'll just you know you could plug them in and you know something has happened to it. You could even like demagnetize them accidentally. There's always a danger to whatever. It comes back to those like original physical formats, even tape. I mean, there are a lot of dangers to tape, and obviously tape wears out, but there are ways of like rescuing it. Um, I recently went through this with like all of my old, like very early recordings, like when I was just starting to learn how to write songs. I have this, I actually have one here. I'll show it to you. These old zip discs, if anyone remembers these.
Oh, zip
Um,
this, yeah.
yeah, I have like dozens of these things, and I had to back them up by just putting them in the original like digital little workstation that I used and just recorded those back into my computer. And now they're saved in like three different spots, but now they're all on hard drive. I should probably back everything up on like CDs, but then it's harder to get things that play discs. Like now they're, you know, eliminating optical drives from everything, and I can't listen to a CD in a new car if I bought one. But the thing that played it back, that played the zip disk back, started failing because that was old enough. So I was like, there's a chance that I might not back up everything that I have, and I could just lose it forever unless I just go out and buy another one of these old workstations. But it could face the same problem because it seems like at some age, like all of the disk drives fail. So
It's
I'm
amazing
glad
how
that
technology just slowly but surely disappears from in front of your eyes. I went
yeah.
out to, you used to be able to go to like any supermarket or whatever, or sort of reasonable size store that does like multiple stuff, and get an aux cord, right?
Hmm.
I went out at the weekend. I couldn't find one anywhere, right? Because
Yeah.
everything's Bluetooth now. Everything's
Right.
wireless Bluetooth, right? So it's like nobody's selling a standard auxiliary cord. It's like, of course, you can get it online, but
Yeah, but then you gotta wait, and there's this
yeah,
shipping thing. There's like an environmental concern to it.
but
That
it's like it shows you, doesn't it? It shows you that slowly but surely it's kind of like pulling away from the physical. Having said all of that, the great thing is that more and more people are buying vinyl again. More and more people are buying tape again. I just feel
Mm.
that another element of that, which is that people are trying to go back to physical because, and I don't think it's just because people realise that they can perhaps support artists by buying something physical. I think there's an element of that which is brilliant, but I
Yeah.
also think it's because we as humans will revolt against the loss of any kind of tangible thing in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like the music heads led that drive back to something that you can hold. But I'm very happy that it's caught on with like just more like just casual, I guess you call them, music listeners, like people who just like what they like. They'll go out and buy like the Taylor Swift records or something, right? Like these things become collectible. Um, I'm very happy to see that, and I agree with you that I think that there's this like humanity to it. Like if if it's not real, it's hard to like wrap your head around it. It becomes too abstract and it becomes like kind of non-existent. And I think that's why so many people like don't pay for this stuff anymore. Like they don't want to pay for music, but they'll pay a company to give it to them, uh,
Mm.
versus like paying the person that they like making the thing, right? Like if you like some indie artist that like maybe is unsigned or something who is making music in their basement, and you really like what they do, but you're just constantly streaming it, like you know that that's not helping them. Like everyone I think at this point has been reminded that streams are like fractions of a cent. So, but it comes down to the convenience. But maybe if they saw that person live, it would feel a little bit more real, and hopefully they would be like, I want the thing to relate to the like moment or to the person, like a CD or a vinyl or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you're always listening at at a distance and you don't ever like associate the music with reality, with like a person or with a thing, that's always going to be too abstract, and you're just going to be getting it from the computer or from your phone, like over the air. And it's sort of just like
Well, it's
not,
why I've
yeah,
encouraged certain artists to have T-shirts made with "I listen to," and then insert name of the artist on
right.
Spotify or whatever on the T-shirt. But then it says on the back, and I paid them 10 quid for the T-shirt or whatever it is because and some people have taken me up on that because the whole purpose of that for me was saying to other people, actually, when I put this on, I'm inhabiting the fact that I've actually given something to that artist, and
Right.
I need you to see that there's, if in a way, because I think the t-shirts are really good um, symbolism for that in a way, and I've got
Sure.
millions of band t-shirts, but because in a way it's kind of a symbolism of actually kind of putting on a skin and that that has belonged to that artist, and you've taken that and
Hmm.
you're inhabiting that now, and I think that's kind of an important message to get out there to people, which is that if you live in that person's skin, literally for 1 minute, you have to understand what's gone into that art. You have
Yeah.
to.
And there's a sort of like lifestyle too. Like one of my favorite bands is Iron Maiden, and like that that culture of wearing Maiden shirts and like having a lot of Maiden shirts. It's it's this like signifier when you're in public. Like if you see someone else wearing a shirt and maybe you're not wearing one, you know what the deal is with that person. But if you're
Right.
both wearing one, there's this like instant connection. You can kind of like, share a glance or something.
So
And I
get
think
you.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, I took a friend of mine to see Marillion for the first time last year at Christmas, and before we went to the gig, we walked into the nearby pub, which is where every other Marillion fan that was going
Yeah,
to the gig had,
for sure.
and he just looked around this pub and he went, "Everybody's wearing a Marillion t-shirt." I went, "That's yeah, everybody," because it's it's important. It's a family,
Yeah.
and this is a family of people that are saying, "Well, this is this is what we're here for.
Yeah, it's like people being into sports, like if people go to a match or something, they'll all be wearing, their team's jersey or colors or something. It's a weird disconnection, I guess, of like how people are really into giving money to a larger entity that represents what they're into. But when it comes down to like a person to person, or like a person, like a small group, like a band or something, there's like a weirdness to it. Like it feels like tipping, or like there's a shame to it or something, like, oh, or maybe they think that they don't need to, because it's like there's this mythos around bands and music, like, oh, well, they're making music and I heard it somehow. They must be huge. They're fine. They don't need me to buy their CD or something. It's like, if you're willing to pay a corporation like Spotify to provide you the money, or, to provide you the music, you can go around that and you can give the person making it your money.
Your money, yeah.
Yeah, or if you're willing to buy like a jersey from a sports team or something, like treat the band the same way. Like that's what it comes down to. You're into this thing, so you can rep it in a really authentic, like real way.
Yeah, maybe one day someone will just develop a competitor to some of those platforms that and just say, right, I'm giving all of the money to artists. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, there's something there. And I know like SoundCloud has kind of been pushing that, and I mean Bandcamp to me is still like the best way to do it. But
I
there's
like
still like
Bandcamp.
this, yeah, there's still this kind of like middleman approach of like they'll give you a lot of your merch sales, but then like they make up for it by keeping more of your digital sales, which is like, I mean, okay, whatever. That's less money, so it is kind of like the more ethical way to do it. And they do need
Yeah,
to make their money somehow to host all
yeah,
this
no, they
stuff.
do, they do.
Yeah.
And the one thing I love about Bandcamp, I'm going to push Bandcamp here. The one thing I love about Bandcamp compared with some of the other platforms is that it is very fan curated as well. And that's
Yes.
the thing
Yeah.
I really love about it, is that they do allow actual people to go, oh, here's my collection, this is what I'm listening to. If you like this, then you probably like this, which is great.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
opposed
Yeah.
to you know the other things where you say play me some whatever, and it plays you the 50 tunes that some exec has decided that we've all got to listen to.
Yeah, yeah. There's no algorithm, and it is like much more transparent on like what the editorial is. It's other people, right? It's all this like, okay, well, if you like this is recommended by other people who bought that album too, and that you can browse people's collections is that's one of my favorite things. That's like sharing music. When I was younger, and it was like someone that you knew bought a new CD and they wanted to show it to you, like you could be excited about something that you're into. You could share that with people. I really miss that.
Mm. Listen, it's been wonderful talking to you today. Before we leave, just in case people haven't listened to your music, just give us a quick overview of what you've just released.
Yeah. So I have a few singles out now for an album called Pueblo that's coming out on September 1st. It's under the name Berkley. You can listen to it on any of the streaming platforms, or you could go to alwaysberkeley.bandcamp.com to check it out there too. You can pre-order the record now from Bandcamp or bigsecretrecords.com. And you could also get the record from bigsecretrecords.com if you don't want to do Bandcamp also. Yeah, it's just like straight ahead kind of music. I actually got really lucky and had some Bandcamp folks check it out, and they said that it reminded them of like Laurel Canyon kind of stuff,
Mm, mm.
which is that's such high praise. I actually wasn't really intending that, but I will totally take it. So yeah, if you're into that kind of stuff, it's like that, with some more like modern electronic like production type of touches that bring it up to today. But yeah, if you're into stuff like Pete Yorn, uh, I don't know who else. Yeah, I've been told like some like Mirage era Fleetwood Mac when they got into using more synthesizers. Um, yeah, if you're into that kind of like straight ahead mid tempo indie stuff, I think that it'll be for you.
Uplifting. Let's say that.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Uplifting but cerebrally challenging all at the same time. Uh, Thank you so much. Andrew,
Yeah,
for
thank you,
coming and
Graham. I
talking.
loved talking about this stuff with you. This was fun.
No, it's a pleasure. I hope that's whetted your appetite. If you into all things electronic music production, um, the state of the nation when it comes to music distribution as well. I hope you've enjoyed this chat. Please do share it with your friends, and do please go and check out the music of Berkley as well, on the various platforms. If you have enjoyed this, please do subscribe and share. If you haven't enjoyed this, well, then it's just tough, isn't it? And this actually hasn't been my music. In that case, then this has actually been an instructional video on how to put together your halogen lamp that you bought last week. And you can now go and do with this video whatever you like, because we don't care. We'll be back with more of my music soon. Until then, bye for now.